Welcome back to Wheel Tutorial Part 3 in Tinkercad. In this section, I'm going to cover the final couple of things you can do with your design, and that includes adding the last element of the rim, which is, or of the wheel hub, which is the rim, and also then adding the wheel. Now, the wheel and rim, so far we've pretty much only used cylinders and a couple of paraboloids for the lug nuts. But what we're going to do now is use two new shapes. And one of these shapes I mentioned in the last video I discovered while I was kind of just playing around, and I realized immediately how powerful it could be and how useful. I actually use this shape for almost every single sort of complex curve style shape that I build. It's amazing for things like jet engines or sort of the cockpits of like spaceships or whatever you kind of want. And that's the ring. So the ring's super useful. I'm going to show you how I would go about using it here. First thing being, I do have to make sure it is kind of up a little bit here. And I'm going to make sure it's big enough. The first thing you're going to do is you can drag the ring over your object. And you are going to make sure that it does sit nicely there. So it kind of looks like it's sitting pretty close. It needs to be a little bit bigger. You know, it's always fine to have a little bit of an overlap between these objects, right? They kind of blend into each other. So drop my ring in there. It's essentially the shape I want it, about the size I want it. I'll use my align tool or hit L and make sure that it's aligned on both horizontal planes. I shouldn't have any spokes pushing through it. They should all kind of be nicely sitting with the ends of the spokes in the rim of the wheel. Now, you might be wondering why I don't just immediately put a tire on here. It's because I'm a little bit of a person for detail, but it's also because there's this really cool little thing you can do with the ring tool. Now, you'll remember if you've taken any sort of intro sort of lessons with Tinkercad, if you click on an object, it immediately brings up in the shape sort of palette here any options available. Now the ring only has two. It has the number of sides, so I could technically build myself a nice, very, very sort of octagonal style ring shape here. But I want as many sides as possible. I am actually a little sad that they don't have more than 24. I'd love it to be a 64-sided ring, so it's closer to the cylinders as far as smoothness. But underneath that, you'll notice there's this little grid with these little squares and dots. Now, if you've never experienced vector drawing before, this might not make sense to you. But as someone who spent a lot of time using programs like Adobe Illustrator, I immediately knew what this was for. And these are sort of vector controls and control arms for basically, this is a cutaway of the ring shape. And so you can actually customize the shape of the ring by moving these around. So if we drag this out, you can see here, we can actually create like these really interesting shapes like that. Now where this gets really interesting to me is this allows me to build a rim by actually dragging this point in like that and then changing the angle of these just to really get a nice rounded edge, making sure that this is aligned to center there. Now you can see that the spokes have come through on this wheel here, so I might have to make this just a tad bigger. But now when you look at the object, and I'm going to actually drag this a little bit wider here so that we have a little bit cleaner of kind of a circle, right? And yeah, now we have this really nice rim shape that we can actually have our wheel sit on. Now you can go in and customize this as much as you want, play around with it, but it's a really powerful little adjustment tool. And so I'm pretty happy with that shape. I've got my nice convex right here. So I'm going to grab the hub. I am going to drag it up just a tad so it kind of sits in the middle there. We want the good support of the spokes to the rim. I'm going to drag it up one more. Let's just take a look. Okay, that looks pretty nicely aligned. And I am going to select this ring. I'm going to make it just a tad bigger. So I'm going to hold down Shift and Option just so it scales in sort of in the correct aspect ratio. Things are looking good here. Are they hitting the edges? Looks like everything. I don't have any gaps. You do always kind of want to preview stuff, right? You want to make sure that it is all correctly connecting. That looks like a really nice rim. I'm going to change its color to the gray of the rest of the rim that I've designed, or of the hub I've designed, and I am going to group these two things now. Which now means we are about 90% done here. All we have to do is add a tire, and a tire is very easy. It's kind of the final shape you'd use, and that's just above the ring. You go up here, it's by the paraboloid. You could use a tube if you were going for like more of a like a car or truck style tire, and you'd throw a nice little sort of bevel on the edges. I'm going kind of old school with like a little bit more of like an old motorcycle or like Model T style tire. So I'm going to use a torus, which is more of a tube, but like as in like an inner tube, as opposed to the like straight tube here you'd use for a different kind of tire. I use just a regular tube to do the tires on my Jeep, but for this one I'm going to use the torus and make it nice and big. Adjust its tube wall size. That looks okay. I actually might make it maybe just a 2. You can always customize these things, right? Let's align these and see if they do line up. So center to center. That definitely does not. I need to make this tire a little bit bigger. Try that again. So align it. Center to center. Oh, we're getting real close there. That looks actually almost perfect. I am going to move it up just a tad. There we go. And it actually sits just inside. So I do need to change the tube radius probably down to like a 0.18. See if that makes a difference. Yep, perfect. Okay, I've got the steps. I got 24. So also another one where I'd love to have it be a little bit smoother. That's just one kind of the things you got to deal with the tube, but I will boost its sides up just so we have a smoother transition there. So we got our radius, we got our tube, we got the wheel hub sitting in there just beautifully. Let's change this to a black, and then we're going to group these two objects. So I'm going to take them, I'm going to group them. And you might have known this little trick, but when you do group things, they'll always kind of default to all being the same color, which isn't necessarily something you want. It's kind of processing now, so it's not going to do it for a sec. But as soon as it does kind of combine the two objects, I will show you how I would go about fixing that. It's a really easy little step. You just change it in the color options right here. You click on that, so there, it went all to one color. But you go to color options and then you just click the little multicolor checkbox, and it allows multicolor grouping and just remembers what each one of these was. So that's how I'd go about building a wheel. You can even get more complex. You could use the same basic idea that I used with the radial spoke pattern to actually create like a radial tread on the entire object. It's really easy. It's all about how kind of complex you want to go. Right? Like I could either do sort of a radial tread using cutouts, or I could do a radial tread by just actually adding little sort of nubs and then doing that radial duplication style design as before. But now you got an object, it's beautiful, it's built, you can scale it in size. So you know, I want to go smaller. And you would never go this small if you were actually designing it, because it actually makes it a nightmare to select your nodes. But now that you've got it all built, it's much easier to kind of downsize this and have it work from different angles. So that's how I would go about building a radial spoke wheel. It's an incredibly complex looking design, but as you can see, it's just about really leveraging the power of the duplicate tool, which is one of the most powerful tools in Tinkercad. I use it both to do things like this. I built a jet engine, and so I created a whole bunch of sort of a single prop or a single one of the propeller fans, designed it nicely, and then attached it in and started duplicating it to create like the jet engine turbine. So it only took a couple minutes to do something that could have taken a long time. So that's how I did it, and hopefully this helps you with your own Tinkercad designs.